It is a member of Medarot Navi's Zodiac series whose symbol is the ram, but also with a secondary motif of the harbinger of death it also represents. It is CPC00 Capricorn, with a kit of stat cleanse, double effect clear, multi-legs, and the leg ability of Trap Buster, which removes any active traps placed on the user's side upon completing a turn or usually charging Metaforce. Now, we have actually seen Capricorn before, previously as an enemy NPC, usually in Story Mode Arc 3, which was geared around Medarot Navi, and where a good chunk of the returning models of that series did debut originally. But going forward, she is officially going to be available as a gacha model going from this coming week forward, and with it she's packing some very interesting skills under the hood, so to speak. Stat Cleanse is a healing-based skill that, when used, will remove any active negative ailments from herself and all allies, and also render her entire team immune to ailments for a set number of turns relative to the part rank. Right arm and left arm of Effect Clear kind of are the very antithesis of this, meaning she is allowed to completely buff her allies with Stat Cleanse and anything else she may consider, but with Effect Clear, when attacking an enemy, it will check the enemy and the target for any positive effects applied to themselves. If it detects any, it will deal additional punish damage and then also forcibly remove all active positive effects at the time. To put this in another way, the recently collab model Urzatine from the Full Metal Panic collab had basically a setup version of this very same skill. Capricorn was just one of the first few that actually made use of the skill more actively before that officially became a thing. Multi-legs do also grant Capricorn fairly decent coverage on most terrains, and to be honest, I was kind of impressed by how moderately well balanced she is across the board, despite her overall pure kit being relatively niche, I guess, for lack of a better term. With mobility of 752 is kind of in that nice sweet spot of where multi-legs want to be. Never really any lower than, but also in a nice sweet spot. Melee resist of 1008 and a shoot resist of 968 are pretty close and moderately well-rounded, so she'll be pretty consistent when it comes to overall damage reduction. But an evade of 840 isn't super great. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's not the greatest there is either. Her overall base power is not super high either at 972 for the right arm and 767 for the left, but given that a lot of her extra and main damage in this form will come from removing positive buffs, this really isn't an issue to begin with. However, with Stat Cleanse, that is openly welcomed on any team no matter where you put it, and that's something you can easily use anywhere. Her HP pool across the board is actually moderately tanky compared to what you'd expect most standard females to be too, at about 4,400 HP for the head, about 3,900 per arm, and just shy of 4,500 on those legs, means that even if her resistances aren't super high, she can definitely take a hit and keep on kicking moderately well. Now, for those that have played Navi, the original Navi on GBA are well aware of, Capricorn is also capable of a meta change form, where she will tuck in her body and her scythe and assume more of a hooded or cloaked figure kind of motif, more akin to her motif as a harbinger of death in this case. While in this form, Capricorn trades her kit out for a more offensive and interruption-based one in this case, with Drive A being a melee variant of Destroy, her Drive B being Level Drain, and Drive C being Counter Guard. She changes her leg type to Flight and her leg ability to Spearhead, which passively buffs heat stat when using parts and on her active turns. Destroy just in general is a gambling skill, but it's one you generally can't go wrong applying to a team just to have it, as it is very good as a shield buster in some cases, unless the model is a meta change shield. But in all other cases, if it is a shield, or if it correctly targeted a part the opponent is going to use, or has used, it is instantly broken, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Level Drain is a rather somewhat niche and somewhat rare ailment that we don't see super often, but simply put, what it does is it doesn't just attack the base stats of a part or their armor, but it instead attacks the metal directly and debuffs their level by a certain point, which means overall their efficiency will drop, which means their speed will drop slightly, and their base power will also drop notably, which is very good for cutting down on the particularly dangerous foes if used correctly. And then Counter Guard is a defense-based skill that, while on the line, will allow her to intercept incoming melee-based attacks and reflect them back to sender at half of the intended damage. Flight legs in this form do also give Capricorn a pretty solid mobility on most terrains decently well, focusing instead on having a much higher mobility at 1131, which is mostly par for the course with flight legs. In terms of that too, her HP pool combined at about 16.5K is really, really good. Her melee resist will drop notably to about 816, which is much like shoot resist in her earlier form is alright. Not super great, but not all that good either. But her shoot resist will go up very noticeably at almost 1300 in this case, with her evade absolutely going through the roof at almost 2000. Now, in this form, this is where she definitely will be making a lot of her base damage if you choose to use her in a more offensive-based role, which is kind of against what she wants to do to begin with, since her role is mostly for interruption and support. That being said, as a pure set score, I do honestly have to rate Capricorn pretty flat, 6.5 out of 10, given the fact that even if she is particularly tanky, and some skills like Stat Cleanse or even Destroy are very good to have on any team, especially given that they're on the same bot, no less, in different forms, it does kind of beg a lot of problems with Capricorn that make her difficult to use. Namely, that both of her forms in meta change mode require CG to use, which by herself is not very easy to obtain or maintain without someone actually helping her on that. In addition, of course, being flight-legged, that does also render her susceptible to the anti-air weakness, which is times 7 across the board and much stronger of a punish damage if she's not actually defending or somehow dodges the blow. As a mixed parts, on the other hand, I do have to rate her about a 5 out of 10, given that even though Stat Cleanse and her legs are actually decently solid, Effect Clear unfortunately is somewhat niche, even in current meta where even debuffs or even Effect Clear can be made very useful. And Stat Cleanse, of course, always wonderful no matter what, that speaks for itself, but if you use her as mixed parts, you're kind of losing a good chunk of what actually makes Capricorn so potentially dangerous if used in the right hands. Now, granted, as mentioned, her head and legs can be used moderately well, and both her arms, if you do need them for Effect Clear, can be pretty solid if in the rare case you need them, but by herself, it would be best recommended to use her as a pure set more than mixed parts.